This week on A Lively Experiment, who are the leading candidates for the race in CD1? One candidate says his poll indicates it may not be who you think. And 8 Republican candidates for president gather for the first time in a volatile debate in Milwaukee.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazenwhite Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.
Joining us on the panel, attorney and former state representative Nick Gorham, Boston Globe reporter Amanda Milkovits, and political strategist Rob Horowitz. Welcome into this week's Lively. I'm Jim Hummel. It is great to have you with us. It was inevitable that the CD1 race would eventually take on a negative turn. We've got a lot of ground to cover this week as Sabina Matos called on other candidates to drop out of the race and support her against Aaron Regenberg. Gabe Ammo said, not so fast, and that he has an internal poll showing him in second place behind Regenberg, with Matos down the pack. Rob, you've looked at a lot of polls over the years. Maybe the first red flag is internal poll, but timing is good with Gabe Ammo, but we should take this with some caution, right?
I think, firstly, you have to take all primary polling with some caution, simply because in general elections, you have party cues. You have Democrats and Republicans. There's a fixed number of swing voters. So polls are within certain limits, and they're usually fairly accurate. In primaries, because there's no party cues, numbers move up and down, and people change their mind a lot, especially on a race where you still got most of the candidates relatively undefined. In terms of the methodology of this poll, when you combine robocalls, this is what it looked like, automatic calls, and text messages, although text messaging is used more and more because people don't pick up the phone as much, you could question the methodology. Smart of Gabe Ammo to release it. He's trying to say it's a two-way race between me and Aaron. She's trying to say it's a two-way race between her and Aaron. The one thing I think that we could probably conclude is Aaron's doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think the release of the internal poll, for what it's worth, kind of showed why Sabina Matos was attacking Gabe Ammo during the debate that the Globe had featured. And she went off on him as being a lobbyist for Home Depot, which he seemed to explain, well, why? Why not? Are internal polls really worth anything? I don't know. And is the general public really paying attention to it? Not really. I mean, my takeaway is the same. I think Aaron Regenberg is clearly in the lead at this point.
Let the record show, Nick called Gabe Ammo saying, look out for him last time you were on, and that was probably 8-10 weeks ago, right?
Seems longer than that, but whatever. Yeah. Yeah, I did. I also thought Don Carlson would do very well, which I thought he was doing okay until just very recently. But as for Gabe Ammo, I still think, well, I know that polls are polls, especially in primaries, but I think there's probably a symbiosis when you can get your poll out there before the primary and start. People like to go with winners sometimes, and they like to see somebody who they appreciate. If they're going to support him, now they'll really support him and make sure they vote. So I think it was a really smart move on his part to publish his internal poll, such as it is. But I agree, Regenberg is really the toughest customer in the race, so much money. And I also said money was probably going to be a big factor in this. I still think so.
Down the stretch.
Yeah, I think so. I think the money's going to really matter a lot.
Well, how much has the signature scandal hurt Matos? It hasn't hurt her on endorsements. I mean, we get those emails every day. The unions are continuing to endorse her, but you wonder what the average Joe is. It's been a lot of coverage over the last month.
It has been, and I think she portrayed herself as a victim, and that's not really very powerful. I mean, it's her campaign. She should be taking responsibility for however it happened. Obviously, we're still waiting for the investigation to find out how it exactly happened. But it took her a while to really grab the reins on this scandal. And at this point, this is kind of what her campaign has started to be defined by. I don't know that it's going to really hurt her in the long run. But again, if Regenberg's in the lead, you really don't want anything else between you and him.
I think, and I admit, I think that what hurt her more than the actual facts of the petition drive was how she handled it. Because you have to take responsibility. You're in charge. You can't blame everybody. It's that person's fault. It's that person's fault. It's your campaign. I think if she had gotten up and said, hey, we made a mistake, I take responsibility, I think she would have minimized the damage. if there's any accuracy to Ammo's poll, the most interesting numbers in it are how her favorable to unfavorables. Now she's got twice as much unfavorable. On the other hand, it's an 8 or 9 way race. That matters less. And the one thing, at least I didn't factor in, she's got about $800,000 of independent expenditure, television money, pretty good commercials up. So I would not count her out. In terms of the private polling, I think it's actually usually more accurate than the public polling. I just question, simply because candidates spend more money on it. Pollsters that do this for a living know how to really get the primary voters. I just question the methodology of this poll. I agree, though, that Gabe was very smart to release it and try to say, hey, this is a two-way race. Look at me.
Well, he's got us talking about it. Rob, you've consulted a lot of campaigns. We talked about this last week. It was bringing in that congressman from New York. And that it kind of blew up in her face because he got into it with Kate Nagel from Go Local Prov and kind of insulted the press corps and said, you're only picking on her because she's a woman of color. I don't know who's advising that campaign, but what did you think when you saw him come in?
I thought the problem with it was it just reinforced all the mistakes she made. Somebody else saying, I think I got this quote directly. She's the victim here.
Right.
It's another
don't victimize the victim.
What is she? Not to be mean, is she the Donald Trump of the Democratic Party here? Everything's a plot. She's just a victim. That's not.
I'm sure she'd appreciate that comparison.
I'm sure she will.
We'll get that on tape.
I may actually hear about that. Yeah. But I think that's the dilemma here. Again, it's not the original sin. It's how she's, which certainly was sloppy and incompetent. But I think everyone would have forgiven that. It's how she's handled it to date.
I also wonder, Nick, in this, I've heard a lot of people, do we need 4 white guys in Congress? And so, and Sabina Matos and Sandra Cano and Anna Quezada, to a lesser extent, talked about, getting a woman of color in there. I wonder if Gabe Ammo offers that option to somebody, going to the polls who said, look, we need a little diversity, clearly not a woman of color, but he's a Pawtucket guy, he's been in Congress, and I wonder in that last 10 days whether he can capitalize on that.
Yeah, I've thought about the same thing. I think he will. I think whatever your thoughts about that are probably right. I think people would like to vote for someone of color, especially in Congress. I can't think of anyone who's served in Congress for Rhode Island that is of color. So, and he's so polished. He is really good on TV. I've watched
and good
him.
In person.
Yeah, he's so I think he's going to be in the race right down to the end. But there's just so much money out there for Regenberg, and you know,
and then Don Carlson, we thought, has a boatload of money, and then kind of Tim White. So let's talk about that. Tim White had a report this week.
Sure, I want to talk about that, but I just want to jump off on something you said, talking about women of color and maybe Gabe Ammo be the one. I think you can't discount the abortion issue and how important it may be to see a woman, just a woman representing Rhode Island at this point. And what I found so interesting in watching these debates is how different it sounds, because now we have people who English is not their first language. And we have Spanish accents, and we have immigrants, and we have, multiple people of color. We don't have just the usual white guys who are competing. And I think it's really shown how different and interesting the congressional district has become. And I'm not sure which way it's going to go, but, if you have a choice between Regenberg and a woman of color or a man of color, I'm hearing from people who are like, you know what? I want to give somebody else a chance. I like both of them, but why not do something different and have that representation? Okay, so Carlson, what a great story. It has been absolutely fascinating.
Tim White, Channel 12.
Tim White, Channel 12 did it again. I've competed against them before, and they always bring the goods. Their first story I thought was a little thin. They didn't really say what the allegations were, and I thought, okay, there's got to be another shoe to drop, and of course it did, and became even more pronounced.
And so just for people who haven't seen it, it's that there were allegations Don Carlson was teaching at Williams, which is his alma mater, great school, the mini Ivy up in Western Massachusetts, and that there was some inappropriate, potentially, contact with a student who was graduating, and that never rose to the level of a formal investigation.
Yeah.
But Williams told him, don't come back. Now, this is a guy who'd been, I'm sure, a supporter and all of that. So that raises a couple of red flags.
Well, and it's sometimes, in the college environment, it doesn't take much for a college to say, we just don't want to deal with it. But I felt like the second day story really elaborated on it. And the fact that there were multiple lawyers that his campaign or that he had to try to kill the story, I thought was quite interesting.
They spent more time trying to kill the story than to sit down with him and say, right?
That was the worst mistake, I think, just getting a bunch of lawyers involved, because everybody loves lawyers. Everybody knows that.
You guys are,
it must be okay.
You guys are high on the.
I can see that.
You're up there with journalists on the popularity poll. Rob, what do you think?
I think it's tricky because, as Amanda said, you have this college situation. Colleges are always going to err on the side of caution. It may be unfair. I do agree. I think a more straightforward initial response from him would have probably helped. Clearly, when you're trying to define yourself, and he's got a lot of money, I wouldn't rule it out. Anybody out in this race, pretty much, like a few people, I wouldn't rule him out. You don't need anything that negatively defines you. So it's certainly harmful campaign-wise, and more harmful than it would be for somebody who is more known and more defined and people had more feel for. I think just the other person I wouldn't count out here, I think she's got an outside chance, but she's really punched above her weight class in terms of money, is Sandra Cannos, probably run the best campaign with the most limited resources.
And she's really, well liked and respected in the Senate. You see, of course, the Pawtucket cabal's coming out because she works there, but a lot of northern Rhode Island. But I agree with that. She's gotten, Senate President Ruggiero, for whatever that's worth. You've seen a lot of the establishment get behind her. Just one last thing on Carlson. I almost thought it was the nail in the coffin where they had the last quote on the follow-up story. The guy from Williams said, "We are relieved to know that Mr. Carlson does not want to come back." And right?
Ooh, yeah.
That's a bit of a burn.
He does have a lot of money, but he's, polling fifth?
Yeah.
So, the story's pretty hot and everybody's talking about it. Is it going to make a difference in the race in general? I don't know. Who is he going to pull votes from anyway?
Right. Let me just, before we move on, and you've run campaigns, I know this is on the Democratic side. We are less than 2 weeks out. By the time you watch this, we'll be 10 days from primary day. What do the candidates need to do in these last 10 days in such a low turnout election?
Well, early voting has proven to be very potent. It's get out the vote on steroids, really. It's going to make a big difference in this primary. So just getting the vote out, and of course running lots and lots of ads to keep your name in front of the electorate.
And they'll have two statewide, Channel 10 and 12 will be. But I wonder, Amanda, how much we're so inside, and the Globe did its thing, and we did ours here with the Publix Radio and the Providence Journal. Are really people paying attention to debates as much as they used to?
I don't know. I think in general, we have the political junkies and then the rest of the world, which is like, it's August. I'm on vacation and I'll figure it out like a week before. What's the turnout going to be really? That's we talk about who the front runners and it doesn't matter until we know who's actually going to show up at the polls.
What do you think could win this? 10,000 maybe?
My guess is turnout overall is going to be a little higher than people think. So north of 50,000, about 50,000. Last time there was a competitive primary such as it was, and nothing else on the ballot. There was other things on the ballot, but nothing that mattered. It was 2012, Cicilline versus Gemma versus the immortal, may rest in peace, Chris Young. In a three-way, it was about 47,000. I think this will go over that a little bit, not a lot. I think 15,000 probably definitely wins it. 10 could win it. And I agree. I think it's get out the vote at this point. And also, if you have a strong closing argument, debates mainly, in most cases, just reinforce what people already think. And the people that watch it are the ones that usually are most decided. They're watching their candidates. On the other hand, given that this race is so fluid, either a really good debate performance that gets amplified in other media or a really bad one could make a difference.
You're going to the Wayback Machine with Chris Young. I'm having PTSD from some of those debates. All right, let us move on. I put on the subject line for this topic, another win for the Access to Public Records Act, another loss for journalism. So, Amanda, let's set the table. The win was that Peter Nerona, again, sided with Channel 12 and the Journal. Some clerk in Jamestown said that the public signatures from Sabina Matos were not a public record, and we're going to and they're dead people. So
identity theft, because it's got their names, it's got their addresses. Hello, do you remember phone books?
Remember the internet? Right? Right. So
That's why we
Nerona,
got rid of them.
right. So Nerona ruled it, and look, I've talked to him about this. He moved that to the head of the pack because he thought it was a timely decision, not like, okay, we'll get to it for a year. The sadder part was you had a story about 2 newspapers going under.
Yeah, and I feel like both stories really are united in a way. So I wrote about the Charahoe Times, the Coventry Courier, 2 weeklies. Charahoe had actually really started in the 70s, then came back in the 90s. Both started in the 90s, and they are under Rhode Island Suburban Newspapers. So it's a private group that had bought them up. They own, the Westerly Sun, the Pawtucket Times, Woonsocket Call. They own, some papers in California, Arizona. So the publisher said they decided to close those 2 weeklies by the end of the month. Basically because of costs. It's, rising production costs, falling advertising revenue. This is the story of weekly newspapers, which have been disappearing at a clip of 2 a week since 2004 across the country. This is really scary. I mean, I work for the Boston Globe. I started at a weekly. I started at a little tiny daily, and that's where you really get to know the community. That's where you show up. You are the one reporter who shows up at all the town council meetings and all the zoning board meetings, and you really understand what's going on. The Boston Globe is not doing that. Providence Journal isn't really doing that either, and they used to back in the day. And so what
You said we. I say that too.
did.
I say that too. We. Go ahead.
19 years there
It's
and
been a
4
long
years
time.
at the Globe, but yeah, I still say we occasionally. But that coverage is really critical. The publisher says, well, the Westerly Sun is going to cover it, but they don't have a dedicated report in that area. And if you want to understand how important the Charahoe Times was back in the day, when they started, there was talk about a nuclear power plant going into Charlestown. Guess who stopped that?
Right.
That little tiny paper did, because they informed people. That's what we need. I mean, look at Jamestown. There's no real dedicated, steady reporting coming out of Jamestown. So it's very easy for a clerk to say, well, I don't give that out. I run into it all the time with police officers in small towns. We never give out the log. Right. We never give out those reports.
And then because we don't.
Because we don't. But when you had a reporter coming in all the time, they were used to, we have this interaction. Yeah. If the public is going to lose, the public is losing. So.
You've seen that probably out your way too. You live in a rural area.
Yeah, the Coventry Courier was it was a good paper. It was a weekly. And for the record, I worked for a Gannett newspaper before I went to law school.
You did? This is breaking news. I never knew that. What was that?
The Norwich Bulletin.
Was it so pleasant that you decided to be a lawyer?
Well, no, I sold advertising, so I was kind of the Herb Tarlick of, whatever.
I had no idea about that.
So, but I think Amanda has stated it so well, so eloquently. The local coverage is really an essential part of journalism. It's good for society, and it's just vanishing. It really is. The journal doesn't do it anymore. Gannett just has a totally different focus in Rhode Island. I think the Providence Journal has profoundly changed in what it covers and how it covers it.
Well, because it's owned by a larger corporation.
Yeah.
More than 1 out of 5 people in this country, and Rhode Island is not exactly a live in news deserts. This is more common, and it's as Nick mentioned, it goes beyond the importance of journalism. It goes about the importance of democracy, where people learn to compromise, where they learn about practical issues, is in local government and localities, where they learn how to sort of the habits of the heart that Alex Tocqueville talked about. Public TV, I can mention Tocqueville. And there's a correlation, strong correlation between robust local news coverage and civic participation. And that's what we're losing all around the country. And some of the new solutions like Patch and other online things are kind of filling some of the gap, but nowhere near as much of the gap. We've lost, by 2025, we'll have lose 1 out of every 3 newspapers in the United States from 2005 will be gone.
But so, Amanda, when you and I worked at the Journal, you came right after I did. I was there from 82 to 95. And of course, we ran into each other a lot because we were doing stories. The Journal covered every single community. And, you would hear for all the council meetings you went to, people would call you because they knew you were the local reporter for East Greenwich or Woonsocket or whatever. Yeah. I think the thing, as media evolves, and I've thought about this a lot because I've worked in print, worked in broadcast, and now I do a lot of online with a partnership with the Journal. The internet, which is killing newspapers in a lot of ways, have given rise to the Patch. You think the Hummel Report, I can do an 8 or 10 minute video piece that I never would have been able to do. And think of the Globe. The Globe, Rhode Island, it's really, very few people are getting that they're not getting the paper in their driveway. They're looking at you online.
Oh, that's because we have wonderful owners who are investing in news.
And what also if you look, so the Globe, as you know, was the first one to surpass digital subscriptions past the traditional. And you do the math on the monthly times tens of thousands of people, that funds your salary. So that
it
allows
does,
you to
but
do
I'm
it.
not going to the Coventry town meetings.
Right.
All the time. Right. And if you think that, the Coventry's closing, well, I live and work, why would I care? Are you kidding? Because what happens in these towns is going to affect us in the entire state. Yeah. What are the decisions that are made? What are the candidates who are running for local office there and getting on the school boards and changing things? I mean, it really does matter. What I'm finding is people just don't want to pay for it if they don't have to.
That's the economic problem that still has yet to be figured out. If you're a regional outfit like the Boston Globe and you invest money, the online thing works and people are moving online to buy papers anyway. I was in Atlanta, you can't even find a hardline newspaper. If you're the New York Times or the Washington Post, you're doing really well because you have a national audience. To make the economics work in a local town's tough. That's why Patch was the notion was we'll be able to aggregate all this and sell national advertising. No one has yet figured that out. Hopefully someone will, because then you'll have more robust local coverage.
Final thought?
Oh, as a former lawmaker in the General Assembly, I felt that the presence of the press at the General Assembly made a tremendous difference of what we did. And I think it's not quite the same. The Journal doesn't cover it quite the same as they used to. They don't allocate as many resources, and it really hurts the state. But on the local level, it's much worse, I think. Having the press at a town council meeting makes a big difference. It changes the tenor of the meeting, and it helps the public stay engaged, and it's something we're losing.
It's a fun part of my job now. When I walk into a camera to the meeting, there's 5 council members wonder, is he coming after me?
Yeah.
That's the fun part, right? All right,
fun.
let's do this. We're moving along quickly. Let's do outrages and/or kudos. Amanda, let's begin with you this week.
Oh, well, let me just continue talking about local news, because my kudos is to all my brothers and sisters working at these little weeklies, little dailies, here in Rhode Island and across the country. Thank God for you. Stay in there. Please keep up the good fight. We need you.
Exactly. Rob?
My outrage is the 6 out of 8 Republican presidential candidates. Was it last night or the night before?
2 nights ago.
2 nights ago, who, when asked if Donald Trump was convicted of a felony, and by the way, these felonies are overturning an election for the first time in our history, organizing a coup, having nuclear secrets in your basement in Mar-a-Lago. We're not talking about small felonies. Would you still support him if he's the nominee? And 6 out of 8 raised their hands. The funniest being DeSantis, who's looking around trying to figure out whether maybe you give him a little credit for at least realizing maybe it might not be such a great thing to raise your hand. I think that's outrageous, and it's a sign of what Donald Trump's done with the party, and a sign of what John F. Kennedy said when he wrote Profiles in Courage. There's a reason why it's a very slim book. It's politics, not what people encourage.
We'll continue this after outrages, but let me just ask you, I've been thinking about this a lot with the Republicans, and maybe Nick wants to chime in. Are they trying not to alienate the Trump base in case, for some reason, Trump gets taken out? Because their only path to victory, if he stays in, is taking him on, isn't it?
I think part of it is not necessarily taking him directly on. First of all, if you look at the polling in the primaries in Iowa, he's only at 40%. New Hampshire, he's under 40%. It's so your first order of business as a candidate is to define yourself, and I think part of it is they are waiting for him to fall of his own weight. You don't have to take him directly on, but on certain just sort of fundamental values questions, there would have been nothing wrong, and I don't think it would have killed you politically, because you still got to get the people that are open to not voting for him. If you didn't raise your hand at that and say I at least want to look at it and see what happens. Even.
Okay, let's get Nick's outrage, and then we'll go back to that. Or kudo.
First, I guess my kudo is to the Block Island Volunteer Fire Department, who really did save a lot of damage that could have taken place. They did a great job in controlling the fire at
There's
the
no
harbor
truth in the
site.
rumor that you were on the island, but that you rushed over with a hose, right?
I did not run
Stayed
in
out
with
of
a
the
hose.
way.
I stayed out of the way. And also the many mutual aid participants from around the state. Everything worked really well. That was a great thing, well coordinated. I wasn't going to have an outrage. I will say just I can't. I've been a Republican my entire life, and I can't make heads or tails of what's going on in the presidential race. It's just such uncharted territory. I don't really know where any of this is going. You watch these debates, and the number one person doesn't show up, and there are all these crimes that are being alleged. And, it's not just Trump, it's Biden, too. He's mired in a really bad situation with his son. And here we are, heading into election, the likes of which I don't think we've ever seen, with all these allegations about putting presidents in jail and everything. I don't think it's good for the country. I think the debates are going to be impossible until they start talking about Donald Trump. I don't think the debates are going to mean anything if they don't start talking about that.
I would definitely agree. I mean, him not being on the stage, and he's the front runner. He should have been there. He should have been answering questions. But, he's alleged to have committed crimes, and I want to see the system work. And we are seeing the system work. I mean, he showed up to be arraigned. He showed up to have his mugshot and his fingerprints and to be processed. And we are in an uncharted territory. I'm fascinated because if this is truly a country of justice, everybody should be subject to the same rules. It shouldn't be if you're a little wealthy, if you're president or former president of the United States, that you can skate.
Or that I thought this was rigged and I went to all. So, I mean, what is the defense? That he was delusional? I don't know. So let me ask you a question, because we've got a couple of minutes left. My personal feeling is we have 350 million people in this country, and it's going to be Trump and Biden again. If that is the case, or maybe it's Trump. Let's look at the Democratic side, because who knows where we're going to be a year from now, and you have historical perspective on this. Isn't it very difficult for an incumbent to lose if the economy's doing reasonably well, if all of these other things? Doesn't the nod kind of go to the incumbent?
Usually, on the other hand, Joe Biden's approval rating is relatively low. It's mired
even among
40.
Democrats.
He'll end up doing fine with Democrats, but it's mired overall, in the low 40s. His age is a real issue. So he is vulnerable, and Donald Trump didn't get reelected. George H.W. Bush didn't get reelected. You could not get reelected. Jimmy Carter didn't get reelected. Now Donald Trump makes Biden a very solid favorite. 64% of voters already say they definitely or probably won't vote for Donald Trump. Over 50% are saying definitely not. Whatever little bump he may be getting in the Republican primaries, which I think is overrated, by the way. I think he's much more vulnerable than people realize, even in the primaries. I'm not sure he's going to be the nominee. In the general election, this all hurts him. And it's another year of all the acting up he does may help him in terms of the primary a little bit, hurts him with the swing voters.
Last 30 seconds.
I just can't believe that a Democrat, other than RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., hasn't stepped forward. I feel strongly Biden is really not
on an incumbent
yeah,
president.
But it's much better for the country if a good
look what happened
Democrat
to Ted
came forward.
Kennedy when he tried to take on Carter.
Yeah, that was different, though. Carter was not compromised, as I think. Biden is clearly compromised, and I don't think he's going to last another 4 years. Some Democrats should step forward, and if they would, I'm sure they would be rewarded for their bravery alone to take him on.
All right.
And they should.
We got to go. Thanks, folks. We appreciate it. Rob and Amanda and Nick, thank you. Folks, come back next week. We have one more program before primary day, and we'll see what happens over the course of the next week. We'll be back here to discuss it as the lively experiment continues.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by.
Hi, I'm John Hazenwhite Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.